Good morning. So nice to see all you bees out there. Actually, I can't see much of anything at all out here.
You can see anything?
No. So, I'm going to start this morning by telling you guys a little story. When I was a kid, I knew that there were 68 steps from the front door of my house to the mailbox. And I knew that there were 72 more steps from the mailbox to my bus stop. I also knew that there were 49 tiles on the ceiling in our kitchen. You see, as a kid, I used to count all the time. That's what I did. And I was using that counting as a coping strategy to separate myself from the sad, lonely emotions I was feeling as a bullied, awkward, gay kid growing up in the conservative Deep South. And that counting for me continued throughout my teenage years, throughout my college years when I became a professional counter by getting an accounting degree. And it was just what I did to separate myself from emotions. So I got a CPA license and started a pretty successful career where I entered the public accounting space, corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions. I was living in exciting places like LA and Mexico City and New York. And by the year 2000, I was a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company in New York City, making a boatload of money. And during that time, I'd become a professional at suppressing my emotions, appearing strong, and winning. And the companies I worked for actually supported that kind of mentality, winning all the time and leaving your emotions at the door. And then on September 11th, 2001, something awful happened in New York. I was there and watched the second plane hit the tower, and it really shook my whole numbers and counting world to the core. On September 12th, when I walked to work that day, I had made that walk to work so many times before. But this time on September 12th, it was really different. You know, instead of doing what I normally did when I walked to work, which was count the number of times the don't walk sign blinks, or make sure I get exactly 100 steps between city blocks, I wasn't looking down, I was looking up. I was looking up at people. I was making eye contact with people. I was sharing a moment with people that I passed on the street, complete strangers. I was looking them in the eye, and maybe for the first time in my life, I was allowing them to look at me in the eye as well. It was powerful. Those 35 blocks that I walked to work that day really changed me to the core. And I got to work, and I was visibly shaken when I walked in the lobby that day, and I was teary-eyed. I had been crying, and my coworkers looked at me. I think I needed a hug. I think I needed something. I needed some kind of connection with people. They weren't there. They just kind of looked at me with confused looks and stares, and that's when I realized that companies really don't pay much attention to how their employees are feeling at work. I had gone from being deeply connected with complete strangers outside to being completely disconnected in the workplace. I knew I had to do something. I actually quit my job that very day. And I wanted to figure out more about what this other part of me was that I had been ignoring for so long, this part that felt so interesting, so deep, so emotional, so human. So I spent the next several years of my life exploring this other side of David Kahl. I went on countless silent meditation retreats. I read books about brain neurology. I thought about how I had been so disconnected my whole life. And what I realized was, not only was I completely disconnecting myself from my emotions, but I was severely depressed. I was thoroughly unhappy, without any real friends in my life. I'm working for companies that supported that kind of mentality. I knew I had to do something different. So in 2006, when I moved to Portland, I made some commitments to myself. First, I committed to living my life more fully and appreciating the entire human that I am. And second, I wanted to build a company that was also about more than just the numbers. A company that conducted business more fully as well, and a company that cared about culture, cared about taking care of its employees to support one another. You know, when people talk about culture, they're generally talking about a company's cognitive culture. Cognitive culture is the shared intellectual values of a company. For example, how competitive a company is, how customer-centric or team-oriented a company is. And that's all well and good. But there's another part of company culture that lives alongside its cognitive culture, and that's a company's emotional culture. Emotional culture governs what emotions we're feeling at work, how we communicate those emotions, and which emotions are better off being suppressed. Now, while the clear difference here is thinking versus feeling, these cultures are also communicated differently as well. Cognitive culture is communicated verbally, intentionally, whereas emotional culture is a little more subtle. It's communicated non-verbally. It's communicated through body language and facial expressions and energy. What I found out is, companies rarely manage their emotional culture nearly as deliberately as they do their cognitive culture. And many companies don't really pay attention to emotional culture at all. And when we don't pay attention to emotional culture, we're overlooking something that is fundamental about what being human is all about. And we'll never realize the full potential that we have together in the workplace. In 2016, Harvard Business Review and the Wharton School of Business conducted an extensive study in this area. They studied 3,200 employees across 17 different companies in 7 industries. It was a nice swath of the population. And what they found was companies that had strong emotional cultures had employees who were not only happier and more committed to their employers, but they had a higher level of personal accountability in the work that they did. They gave a shit, essentially. The lowdown on that study is companies that had a mentality of winning all the time, us versus them, and a scarcity of resources, had intentionally or unintentionally created an emotional culture of fear. And that results in employees who are mistrustful, highly politicized, and that leads to teams who are disengaged and subpar. Now, for those companies that would instill more compassion, kindness, and empathy into the workplace, the study found that those employees were connected. They were connected to each other. They were connected to themselves. They were more connected to their customers. They were more secure. They were more confident. They were more creative. They were more human. So what can we all do in this room to create a strong, healthy, nurturing emotional culture in our businesses and our B Corps? Well, we can start by putting those words in our mission statements. Compassion, kindness, empathy, even love. I know as the CEO of my company, I have the most control over the emotional culture in our business, and I must lead by example. But it's not just up to me. I can't just force everyone to support one another emotionally. We have to do this together. We owe it to one another to create a workplace where we all feel connected and supported. So I'm going to leave you guys with 4 things we can all do as B Corp employees to ensure we have a strong emotional culture in our business. Everybody's talking about mindfulness, right? And there's a reason everybody's talking about mindfulness. You know, you don't have to go on a month-long silent meditation retreat or a week-long silent meditation retreat or even sit on a cushion for 45 minutes a day. Just have the intention of paying attention and of noticing what's happening. Even if it's just an opportunity when you've just sat down with your cup of coffee and you're feeling what it's like to hold something warm in your hands, to take stock of how you really are in that moment without any judgments, with gentle awareness. You know, each moment it consists of the physical sensations of the moment, the cognition that's occurring in our brains, and the emotional state that we're in. So noticing, what's it like in this moment to feel the way I feel? And you can even name your emotions. You can start easy. Mad, glad, sad, right? Oh, I feel sad. I feel mad. You know, emotions can manifest themselves in physical sensations in the body, heat in the face, butterflies in the stomach, tightness in the chest. Noticing this is what it feels like to be disappointed, proud, sad. Likewise, we can practice empathy. I like practicing empathy because it's kind of like going on vacation. For once I'm not in myself, I can transport my awareness to someone else and really sense what's happening for them. You know, empathy is us being able to not only detect the emotions in others, but feel with them what they're going through. It can be a powerful and connecting things for those of us who really practice empathy on a daily basis. To let someone else know, not that we're here to fix their problems or we have all the answers, but they're not alone. We're there with them when we can hold their hand, we can look them in the eye, or we can just be next to them and listen. You know, empathy doesn't just have to be about the bad times. It's great to share successes as well with people. And it's wonderful to feel connected in the good times and the bad times. All right, number 3. As if we didn't have another study to prove how important sleep is, I know since you were in college, or maybe even before, your moms and dads have been saying you should get enough sleep, but we somehow find something to distract us. There's some other thing we could be doing that's more important than getting sleep, but that alarm's still going to go off at the same time every morning. So getting sleep is really important for our emotional well-being. As if we didn't already know this anecdotally as humans by doing unskillful things when we don't get enough sleep. Some scientists in Europe just this past year did a study where they took people who had plenty of sleep and people who had less than 4 hours of sleep, and they gave them images of things they thought would elicit emotional responses, like cat videos, cats falling down, like bad things too, like corpses and things like that. And then they gave them pictures of like a spoon or a microphone. And what they found in the brain was those people who had enough sleep didn't have any kind of reaction in their amygdala from the non-emotional images, but those who didn't get enough sleep actually elicited emotional responses to all of the images. So you really are more emotional when you don't get enough sleep. And in fact, in those instances where the images were emotional, those folks who didn't get enough sleep, their neurons didn't fire synchronously. So they actually were misinterpreting the actual emotions that they normally would have been feeling had they gotten enough sleep. So, one more study to prove we owe it to one another and ourselves to get enough sleep at night. Finally, communicating in person. You know, there are so many different ways to communicate nowadays. Besides all the social platforms, between text and WhatsApp, Slacking. There's all of these ways for us to get information faster than showing up and actually talking. So, you know, we're not a company, we don't have companies that are information, well, information's important, but we're comprised of people, and people need to communicate in a deeper way than just texting or slacking. So if you have the opportunity to be in front of a coworker or anyone else, take that opportunity. There aren't enough emojis in the world that can communicate what can happen in a 5-minute conversation with your coworker. So I'll leave you with this. You know, in the earlier part of my life, I segregated myself from my emotions because basically I thought they made me look weak. Boy, was I wrong. Only when I can bring my emotional self with my cognitive self, with my physical body, can I be completely here for this world. You know, we spend more time with our coworkers on most days than we do with our families. Let's show up for them. Let's build a company, let's build a workplace that supports each other to be who we really are. Let's create an environment that enables us and supports us to feel the things we're really feeling. And to remember, above all else, that the workplace is a collection of humans who struggle through life and work. And we're not alone. We can do this together. Thank you.